Municipal Airport Plan Implementation Advisory Commission is called to order at 6:01 p.m. on Tuesday, August the 13th, 2024. We're meeting at Austin Energy Headquarters, and present in person are Commissioners Rosinette, Clements, Hilliard, Sokolic, Kravaniak, Jones, and also joining us online is Commissioner Breimer. The first item on the agenda is public communications. This is an opportunity for anyone to provide up to 3 minutes of testimony on any topic related to the Miller Commission that is not on today's agenda. Has anyone signed up? No one signed up for public communications today. Next, commissioners will move on to the approval of the minutes from our June 11th meeting. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at those minutes, and are there any corrections, additions, or other changes needed to the draft document?
Adoption of the minutes.
Is there a second? Second. Any questions? Those in favor of approving the minutes from the June 11th meeting, please indicate by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? The June 11th meeting minutes are approved. Next, we'll move to discussion items. The first item up from Catellus is the annual update on contracting with women and minority-owned businesses. Brian?
While Kate's bringing up the slide presentation, I'll just do the introductions. My name is Brian Doliesel. I am responsible for marketing and communications for the Miller Project, working with Catellus and the City of Austin. Today I'm giving an annual update for minority and women business enterprise contractors. We do this on an annual basis to give this an update to the commissioners. We also report to the City of Austin twice a year on this. Not a whole lot has changed, I'll tell you in advance, since the last time we came to present to you. The numbers haven't changed a whole lot because there's less infrastructure than we're doing now, and some of the projects that we reported on last time are still going on today. But with that, I will share some information because there's new people in the audience, there's new commissioners, and we'll go forward from there. So in terms of the goals of our process, we kind of tie them into the three, of the six main goals, we tie them into three of those goals. East Austin revitalization, economic activity, and then diversity, kind of the three goals that tie in closely with this. We are not, as the master development agreement between the city and Catellus really generally requires a good faith effort for us to maximize minority and women businesses to participate in the infrastructure projects that are being developed at Miller. We as Catellus, though, have additional goals, and we try to maximize participation as much as we can, and go even beyond what the MDA requires us to do. And then just to remind you what infrastructure really details, it's all the roads, the utilities, the residential lots, but also includes within the parks, the trails, the parkland itself, picnic areas, playgrounds, things of that nature. And then we also, of course, work closely with the third parties who are developing the buildings and try to encourage them to participate in the program too. So we have a variety of ways in which we do that. We have contractors sometimes will need to meet specific goals that we as Catellus have identified for a particular project. And then we spend a lot of time as part of the evaluation process making sure that they're able to meet those goals. And then one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is just doing the outreach and getting the community aware of the opportunities. We will send information to the small small minority business resource department. And we spend a lot of time sending information to the minority contractor groups, whether that's the U.S. Hispanic contractors or the black contractors, and there's a couple different of those, and then the Asian construction workers. We try to get the information over to them, and we'll talk a little more about that here in just a moment. We also have the contractors who are the main contractors who are working on these projects will do some advertising, and then we encourage we require all of those contractors to show a good faith effort in their efforts to find women and minority-owned businesses to participate. So this is one of the main slides that does change throughout the year, but again, the numbers haven't changed a whole lot this go around. Through May 31st, 2024, which was the last time we reported to the city, just a little over $52 million has been spent on minority and women contracting, which equates to almost 25% of the total. You'll see here that almost all of that has been paid out to those contractors. The only reason why something hasn't been paid out yet is because they either haven't invoiced us yet, the project isn't completed yet, or it's actually in the process of being paid. And then so far, we have actually probably close to now 100 businesses that have participated as a minority or women-owned business. You'll see how it's broken out here. About 31% are women-owned businesses. 21% are owned by Latinx entrepreneurs. We've got 25% that are owned by businesses that are owned by African Americans. You'll see Asian is at 2% and Native American is, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of minority businesses that are owned by Native Americans, and that's unfortunate in our community, and that's why it's just a small number. One new number that's on here before, I believe it was Commissioner Jones has asked us before to identify of these participants, how many of them are local. And so this number here, this 88% over here, 80% of Miller's contractors are located within the 5-county region of Austin. Several of them are in Austin in particular, but because, as we all know, Austin is kind of an expensive place to live and to work, a lot of these businesses are also in Pflugerville, Round Rock, Kyle, Hutto, etc. So it took some doing. We had to go through each of the contractors and find addresses and make sure that it was all right, but I think this is a pretty accurate number, maybe off a percentage or two, but it's a pretty good percentage of the businesses are local. And of the remaining 12%, most of them have an office or a satellite located here in Austin, but they may be headquartered in Houston, Dallas, maybe other parts of the country, but mainly other parts of Texas. And just to dive a little bit further, there's, again, not a whole lot of infrastructure that's left to be built at Miller. We're very pleased that with the Eva Carrillo de Garcia Park, which is the park that's along Zach Scott just south of the school, our participation level is 44% minority and women-owned business. Unfortunately, it's a little bit lower for some of the other projects, and it just really kind of depends on either timing of when contracting is done and who's available to work on things, or the type of work that we're asking them to be done. The Tannehill Trail is currently at 6.5%. Roger Levon Taylor Plaza, which is the plaza around the control tower, is currently at 10%. And then Taniguchi Park, which is essentially wrapped up now, was at 25%. I will note on here, you'll see does not include a couple of the businesses that are specified here. We don't track what we would refer to as soft contractors or contractors that are professional service. We really focus on the businesses that are actually doing the contracting work. But it's important to note that with the plaza, Studio Balcones, who has come to present to you a few times, is a women-owned business, and so is McCann Adams Studio that designed Taniguchi Park. And then just real quickly to kind of wrap up the remainder of this presentation, we do make an effort to work with third parties to encourage their participation in encouraging minority and women-owned businesses to participate. You'll look down here, just kind of at the bottom of the screen. I don't have, unfortunately, statistics for every business in our organization that has developed out here, but have learned that Ryan Companies in building the Rivette property, which is the apartment community surrounding the control tower, they achieved 12%, and then Marshall Middle School achieved 19% in terms of MWB participation. And then lastly, for this part of the presentation, we do a lot of outreach, or we have historically done a lot of outreach. I've been personally involved with a lot of that in terms of advertising, doing contractor fairs, either remotely or at Miller Central, and inviting contractors to come learn about opportunities. But we met, I think probably just before COVID, with a lot of the organizations, and they said that their contractors are just way too busy to be reading the newspaper or going to contractor fairs. They're just trying to keep up with all the work that they have in a city that's growing as fast as we are. And they said the number one thing, and really, the only thing that we should be doing is putting information into the hands of the contractor group. So that's what we've been doing, and it's been working very well for us. This is also annual time of year when we share some aerial photography of the community. It may be a little bit hard to see on this particular presentation with the lights and everything, but this will be available online and you can kind of look at it. I'll just kind of point out a couple of things to you. This is the aerial, by the way, these aerials are from May 2024. These are the latest that we have that actually had sunny conditions. I have some that are a little bit cloudier, but it's just harder to see that. So I used the May ones. So this is, excuse me, facing northeast. So you can see the southwest Greenway. This is actually looking at the original collection of homes that were first built in the 2007-2008 time period. It's hard to tell perhaps in this photo, but you can see that a lot of the trees are starting to get taller than the two-story building. So you can start to see the trees, the street trees are starting to come in. Next, this is facing north, but still kind of from the southern end of the community. You can see in the foreground kind of the big white buildings. The first one there is Wildflower Terrace, and then next to that is Rivette Tower, the apartment community that's surrounding the control tower. And you can see that the latest section of homes is really kind of filling in quite nicely. Yes?
I just have a question. I'm sorry, in that slide, are the row homes in the bottom far left going to be like shop homes? Or those facing you?
Yes, yeah. So I don't know if I get the.
I thought some of those were going to be shop homes.
Are you talking about here?
Facing the park. Or am I mistaken?
Are you referring to the project here? Across from the control tower?
Facing.
Yeah, facing the park this way. There will be some shop homes as part of that project, yes. That's in-town homes or Austin Modern Lofts. They're building a collection of condos and townhomes. Some of those townhomes will have some shop homes in there. But we don't know who they are yet. I think they haven't finished building them yet and haven't started really marketing in terms of the type of businesses that might be there yet. Another vantage point, I think I'm off on my, oh, here we go. This is facing northwest, so you can get a good picture of the southeast Greenway, and again, seeing a lot of the homes that are built in the last section of homes. You can see the skate park is over here. You can see the school is here, and you can see Carrillo de Garcia Park, which is a kind of an unusual shaped park because you've got the open field here with the basketball court and the tennis court that are being built, and kind of this narrow stretch, and then another field here that are all kind of part of the same park. And we'll talk a little about that here in my next presentation. Then we come to Aldrich Street, and just to orient you, you've got, hopefully I'm doing this correctly, you've got Miller Boulevard here, and you've got Aldrich Street here. You can see proximity to downtown. You can see a lot of the area has started to fill in. Still a couple, of places that need to get developed, but by and large, a lot of it's moving along nicely. And then this is just another vantage point of primarily Aldrich Street. You can see, of course, the hangar down here, Lake Park. You've got Parkside condos essentially completed. The Bravo building of the Alpha Bravo, where Teachers Retirement System is located, and onward. And then the last slide, again, probably a little difficult to see in this particular presentation, but again, you'll be able to see it better online. Really just kind of shows how Miller and its proximity to downtown and how it's developed as a whole quite a bit. You can also see in the far background up here, this is the Bergstrom Airport, downtown, and all of Miller. And that's my presentation, so I'll take any questions.
Before we start with questions, I just wanted to make one comment. I really appreciated the information about locally owned businesses. I think that helps kind of paint the picture of the economic impact of the project, so.
And just to clarify, that's locally owned, minority,
Yes.
and women-owned businesses. We have we do track local businesses that are in Miller, and I can provide that as a separate conversation. I don't have that information in front of me. But we do track local businesses within Aldrich Street as well as Miller as a whole.
That's good to know. Commissioners, questions? We'll start with Rick and then go to Josh.
Before we get off of these photos, can you kind of go back through and point out any property that is yet unsold and undetermined for development? Is that too difficult?
Because I don't know which ones necessarily are perhaps sold or are taken down from the city. I don't probably know the answer to all of those, but I can try.
Thank you.
All right, if I can look at it a little more closely here. So this parcel down here at 51st and Berkman has not been determined yet. This undeveloped parcel, which would be Miller and Barbara Jordan, this is Shorenstein has the option to develop the office building here, Charlie and/or Delta building. And I think that's it in terms of this slide. Let me find a couple others. We should have an announcement here later this year in terms of the home builders who will build out this remaining parcel. There's the parcel up by the school, has not been determined yet. We know it's going to be residential. It's probably going to be high-density residential, but that hasn't been determined yet. I'm not aware of any of. There's also a parcel next to the school right here that hopefully we'll have some information to share by the end of this year, early part of next year. We're working with a particular project on that, but nothing to announce today. I think that covers everything, unless I'm missing something, Pam or Kate, in terms of.
You mentioned the control tower area.
Oh, yes, thank you. Where are we here? So it's a little hard to see in this particular photo, but there is a parcel of land on the corner of Soren and Barkman that hasn't been determined as well.
Thank you.
And Josh?
Thank you, Brian. I was curious, I often walk down Tilly with my kids or I ride a bike. And at Tilly and 51st, there seemed to be a trail or something going off of Tilly. Can you talk a little bit about what that trail, I mean, is that a trail or what's going on at the bottom of Tilly and 51st?
I think you're referring to what we refer to as the Tannehill Trail. There's a Tannehill Creek that's in that area. And as part of the development, we are, and it's actually under construction right now, and we think it'll be substantially completed, I think, by the end of this year. But that's a trail that kind of extends from Tilly and 51st Street, and I think generally goes south and east. I know Christine Frendel has worked very closely with the folks at CTEC, which is a property owner to the north of the project, to allow the path to go through that project, and eventually we'll continue further south. But we're still kind of working through, I think, some of the final stages of ownership of some of the other parcels of land.
Okay. Can you show where, I actually don't know if there's a slide for it. I would like to see where that trail goes.
My next presentation will include the illustrative map, and I can show it better then.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? And you talked about undeveloped parcels. Are those, based on past history, are those parcels that are likely to be opportunities for a significant number of women and minority-owned contractors, based on our past history?
I think significant is kind of a subjective term, but yes, I think the answer is, in some cases, I know that Amley, for example, does use minority and women-owned businesses, but I don't have their stats for you this evening. So as they're building out and finishing North Park, which is what referred to as kind of Amley 4, and then the 5th project that's under construction on Aldrich Street, They are using contractors. And as we go forward with the remainder of those developers, we will be encouraging those developers to use minority and women-owned businesses. And to the extent that any of them, for example, just hasn't historically, we're very good at kind of walking them through the process, teaching them how to where you need to go to secure that information, filling out the forms, et cetera, et cetera. So we work very closely with those partners to help them through that process.
Commissioners, any other questions? Yes, Corky.
Brian, thank you. I just truffle here. I'm thinking about the UT land, which is leased, but undeveloped. I think we should include that in this list.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I did not include that. Yes, there is the UT, there is the land that is currently being considered for UT, yes.
Thank you.
And the hangar,
Oh, and the hangar, yeah.
or we can lease.
Any other questions? All righty. Is anyone signed up for public testimony on this? All right. Thank you, Brian, and we'll next move on to the developer update.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Brian DeLisa with Catellus, for the record. I think Kate's going to pull up the illustrious because I have a couple of updates that it might be helpful to point out some things, and then I, of course, will point out Tannehill Trail here as part of that, too. All right, well, hopefully you'll be able to point out some things there. I know it's a little small, but it's a big map. Okay, let's start off with the roundabout, which is nearly completed. If you haven't driven around that, they have now striped the roundabout. They have now opened 2 left turn lanes from Airport Boulevard onto Aldrich Street. People seem to be merging on that okay so far. They are principally completed. There's still a little bit of concrete work that needs to work here and there, and then there is the landscaping that will probably be done kind of in the September, October, November period when things get cooler and hopefully we get a little bit more rain. So they'll be working a lot on that. But those improvements mainly included more safety for cyclists, and then turning the roundabout essentially into a 1-lane road as it goes around. So nearly completion on that. Same is true with the cycle track along Zach Scott. Sorry, I should have pointed that out. Roundabout is here. Next, talking about the cycle track that was added in along existing infrastructure at Zach Scott between the airport and Berkman. That is also nearing completion. I think on Monday, weather permitting, the crews are supposed to do some final striping, and then add some final signage and things of that nature. And then the POA's landscape company, Urban Dirt, has been engaged to restore the landscaping that was affected during the construction of that. I'll talk very briefly about, where are we? Airport, it's over here off the screen. Airport and I-35. In this room a few weeks ago, TxDOT gave a kind of an updated and open house to kind of explain what's the latest thinking, and I don't have a picture of TxDOT, but you can go to the website and look at that. The meeting was primarily focused on Airport Boulevard, and the latest, the original version of Airport Boulevard changes included elevating Airport Boulevard over I-35. They have now decided not to do that, so it'll be straight across as it currently is today. It also had a collection of S-shaped trails and tunnels for cyclists and pedestrians to cross I-35. They heard a lot of community feedback that said that that was going to be dangerous to be in those tunnels, and so they have nixed that, and so people on cycles or on foot will cross Airport Boulevard at that same level. Let's see, what else here? There was also plans, once you got north of Airport Boulevard, when you got to 45th Street, instead of turning left on 45th Street like you do now, you would have to go up and then make a U-turn and then come back. They refer to it as a SPUI, or a single point urban interchange. They have removed that item from there, and they have essentially improved the intersection of 45th and Airport Boulevard, so even people who are coming on the southbound lanes instead of having to jog over a moment in order to get to 45th Street, they would have a straight shot to go directly onto 45th. There is still a possibility of, if the city finds the funding for it, to do a cap and stitch or add capping over I-35, specifically from Airport Boulevard to 38th and a half Street. And so this new configuration would allow access directly to that capping if that's what ultimately happens there. And from what I understand from TxDOT, they need to know that relatively soon so they can factor the infrastructure in to do such a thing. One of the other things, and I talked to Commissioner Ronson about this before, originally the city of Austin was planning on installing a stoplight at the intersection of Parkwood and then where Crestwood come together on Airport Boulevard. That project has now been turned over to TxDOT, which means that it's still happening, but it may not happen as immediately as we thought. But the idea is to put a stoplight there as well, so that people who are coming from Delwood 2 and from Delwood 1 and from Cherrywood would have easier access to be able to make the turns with all the traffic that's coming from Airport Boulevard. Northbound I-35 drivers will exit the main lanes at 38th and a half Street, and then they'll use a bypass lane in order to get to Airport Boulevard. And then on the southbound side, drivers would exit the main lanes at 51st Street and then be able to access Airport Boulevard from there. In terms of timing, TxDOT says that they will start the central project, which is essentially from 290 to the north to 290-71 to the south. They'll start that with improving the MLK Junior Bridge as early as the end of this year. But in terms of construction along Airport Boulevard or near Airport Boulevard, that probably won't happen until about 2026 or so, and probably late 2026. Okay, next I'm going to talk about stop signs. I've got an update based on some information received just today. So we're going to start with Aldrich Street. I got some breaking news on this. Where are we? So at the corner of Aldrich Street and Simond, they have completed their study. They are nearing completion of their studies at Robert Browning and Garcia. So here's Simond, you've got Robert Browning and Garcia. And they plan on adding stop signs to the four-way stops at all those intersections. Along Miller Boulevard, they have completed the studies at the intersections of Simond, where are we up here? Robert Browning and Garcia, and they also plan to do four-way stop signs at the intersection as well. Additionally, along Bond Street, they have completed the traffic study at Simond, and they are studying now at Von Philomena. That study is nearing completion. And while a decision to install stop signs has not been made yet, because they're still working on that one study, I anticipate they probably will, based on history, add four-way stop signs there. And then after the city has reviewed data, they will also then study on Vaughn, Philomena, and Robert Browning. Philomena at Robert Browning and at Soren. Along Tom Miller Street, they are also studying the intersection at Berkman. And before you ask, I don't know about any other intersections. So if you have, what about this, or what about that, I don't know. That's all the information I was able to get from them. Timing hasn't been determined yet, but I understand it'll probably be a few months before these get installed. I believe their plan is to install stop signs at along Aldrich and along Miller probably at the same time, even though the studies were a little bit off. Their goal is to get them completed at the same time. Also just wanted to mention real quickly, in the Southwest Greenway, which is down here, there is a trail that goes through majority of the Greenway. But over in this area, we've had some experience of erosion, especially during major storms, and so that work has been almost completed now. We've replaced the DG, or the decomposed gravel, with concrete, and that concrete pour has been completed. Really all that needs to happen this week and next is for them to do some cleanup and then kind of move the dirt kind of back up to the edge of the concrete. That's it in terms of infrastructures. I do have a couple updates related to some new openings. Honest Mary's, which will be located in Amley Branch Park, the same building as Chewy's. They are set to open sometime in September. Nando's, which is the South African-based international chain of Peri Peri Chicken, said recently that they plan to open this fall in the Origin Hotel. We've already announced that, but the timing is new information. Floyd's 99 Barbershop is scheduled to open next to Chipotle Grill in the Miller Regional Retail Center on this Friday, August 16th. And they did send me a note, the managers of that particular retail center, that they're currently 100% occupied, which is a big deal in this economy right now. There is one building, and I'm not sure exactly where it is, where there's one space that appears vacant, but actually has some kind of new concept coming. They wouldn't tell me what it is, but they would keep me posted, and I'll share that as soon as I have more information on that. The last thing I wanted to mention is a mural that has been painted on Branch Park Pavilion, which is there, if I'm looking at it correctly. If you've not been by Branch Park Pavilion, certainly check it out. It's a colorful mural along the white walls. It's called Taking Flight, and it's essentially completed with just a little bit of touch-up work. There's going to be a plaque that will be added to that piece at some point that talks about or credits the artists Ernesto Hernandez and Cindy Tobar. But it'll also include a QR code where people can click on that and have an AI experience on their phone. So they're working through that right now. Texas Mutual, which paid for this plaque as part of their 30th anniversary, and kind of just a nice gift to the community where they now operate. They're working on an official dedication ceremony that'll probably take place sometime in September. And as I know more information, I'll let you know. And that's my update.
Commissioners, questions? We'll start with Ken and then go to Andrew.
Brian, thanks for the update.
Mm-hmm.
On the traffic circle, can you help me recall? So originally I thought there was concern with the stoneware that goes around the tree and that's sort of a straight. And I thought there was concerns that needed to be more at an angle to be able to handle like a trailer that might come around there.
You talked about at the curb?
Yeah, it's the curb. There was concerns, what I recall was that if a trailer hit that curb, it could go up and then tilt over. So has that been mitigated through bringing this down to one lane? Or was that, and this was several years back that I recall a conversation. So, has the information changed that doesn't make that an issue? I just want to make sure, I was thinking about it and just was curious.
I don't know the answer to that. Since I've been working on the project, I've not heard that discussion before, so I've not asked about it. No one's told me about that, but I'm more than happy to follow up on that one.
Thank you.
Andrew?
I will say, speaking to that, now that it's one lane, I think they've painted pretty good striped areas, so you would actually have to go into that area to hit the curb, so.
That may have been the mitigation.
They would have to cross into an area they're not supposed to be to even do that.
But I'll see if I can get a more concrete answer for you.
So my questions, comments are on the bike lane addition to Zach Scott, actually improvement, because I was very involved with the Transportation Planning Committee of the M&A, and I was really overjoyed to see trees planted in the block next to the park, but they stop a couple hundred feet short of airport, and I almost meant to go back to ATD and ask, are there going to be more trees planted? Because there's no reason for them. I was hoping it was the heat that they weren't planting the rest of the trees in.
You're talking about trees still along the park, but closer to Airport Boulevard?
Well, it's in the island that was created next to the bike lane. They planted about 2/3 of the way down, but there's a whole bunch more trees that could go in, and I don't see there's any reason for not. Because I know they extended actually the sprinkler system from the trees that are next to the park across to water those trees.
Yes.
I just hope I'm going to be talking with them.
Well, that's fine. I'll also talk to our
More trees
team.
coming.
Yeah, I'll talk to our team and see, you know, if there's a reason for that. I would be speculating if I, you know, gave anything, I would rather just get the information.
I mean,
I'll
it's
share with them.
grass. I don't think there is a reason not to plant trees. And then in the section between over to Bergman, in fact, I told Nathaniel, the ATD engineer that was involved early on, I saw him at Chris Riley's funeral. But the islands there were just filled with white concrete. And east of Bergman, they're filled with like terracotta pavers, which are much more attractive and reflect a lot less heat. And I just wonder why the standard changed from one side of Bergman to the other.
I'll have to ask about that as
I'm
well.
gonna be talking to them about that too. 'Cause
Sure.
I have no idea why it changed, because I think the pavers are much more aesthetically pleasing.
Well, if you find out before I do, let me know, and if I find out
And
before
to
you
tell
do, I'll
the
let you
truth,
know.
Nathaniel and I said we could, that existing white concrete, instead of jackhammering it out, could be scored and stained to look like pavers.
Okay?
Yes, Josh.
Well, first, anytime you hear there are stop signs going in places we've been asking about for a long time, I just want to say thank you to everyone.
I was hoping you were gonna be here this evening. I
Yes.
thought you in particular would be interested in that.
is tens of drop points on 311, letters to the city, because I've seen so many close calls on a lot of those areas, so many close calls, and I've actually seen accidents. So these are gonna really help, I think, the whole atmosphere of Aldrich Street, and I'm excited to see if we get some more on Vaughn. I'm hearing Philomena, which is right by HEB, right? And then the other one would be Vaughn on Simon. Those are the two that we're waiting on?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
That's really fantastic. So just, anytime we get a chance to celebrate something like that, I just want to celebrate and say thank you. So,
Well, you're welcome, and I would say that because of the 311 requests and the letter writing, et cetera, and we have been working on our side to encourage that, but they do respond, and they do pay attention to the requests that come in, and when they do see a large volume of something, they do pay attention to it, and sometimes it takes longer than they anticipate, because, you know, in addition to all the requests that you're putting in, so is everyone else across the city, and there's, you know, limited budgets, and there's limited scope and limited availability for people to do the studies, et cetera, but they do hear you, and they do pay attention, they tell us that all the time.
great, that's really good. We will keep doing it. So, but I'm really excited to see where it is now. Could you show me with the laser pointer on Tilly Street? I'm interested especially on connectivity there. It's just kind of hard to get from you know, pretty much anywhere to Manor from there. There's kind of a block, and I'm just curious of what type of connectivity for the trail that I was talking about before, so the bottom of Tilly.
Oh, yeah, that's right, so, yeah. I'm not gonna probably know the exact route of this, and so if Pam or Christine happens to know, certainly let me know. But you know, we already have a trail that exists here, and I believe the trail is what goes through here, but I think at some point it has to cut through just a little piece of the CTEC, Emergency Command Center, and then,
It does stop right at.
here, I'll let you. Yes.
Okay, so. What Carl's constructing right now will go from here through here, and it will let out on Old Manor Road,
Okay.
where at this point, you could go right to here and get on 51st. This is the missing link because it doesn't go on our property. And then Rathgaber is here. So, there is, you know, over the 20 years of Miller, that PARD ended up with this little piece over here. So that's a good sign, if PARD on something, and it's being identified in urban trails, it will be a missing link, so that always helps raise that awareness, and if there's awards, it helps elevate that to an important piece to complete. But it would take a bridge, you know, take some work.
Thank you.
Sorry, one other question on that trail. The like level of trail, is that gonna be decomposed granite? Like is there lighting? Is it something you could bike on, walk on? Is it, I'm just kind of curious of the level of build out in that trail.
I'm fairly certain it's decomposed granite. I don't believe we're adding any lighting to it, though. Sorry, I'm gonna have Christine Frendel, who's with the city, to answer that question. She's been working very long and hard on this.
So, as you can imagine, it's in Tan Hill Branch Creek. So wherever it hits the floodplain or an erosion hazard zone, it will be concrete. And where it does not hit those, it'll be decomposed granite. One of the hardest things to get folks through there was we had to traverse. We start on the north side and we actually have to cross because of topography to the south side. And that's how we land on Old Meaner. So the city, there will be 2 bridges, and then there will also be a piered bridge that takes it across the CTEC property. So it's a pretty large investment from the project, but we worked really hard with the urban trail folks at the city. This is identified as a Tier 2 trail in the adopted Urban Trails Master Plan. And what we learned is really without the Miller investment, the project investment, that there would be no trail at all. So this really elevated it in PARD's mind. And like Pam mentioned, really the only thing that's left is working with PARD to get the trail through there. But noting that there are some of the same challenges that we had on the Miller section, which is erosion hazard zones and floodplain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? Yes, Rick?
Not so much a question, but I can add on to that. So the property, once you cross Old Manor Road, then that's actually in Windsor Park. It's park land, though, that has been, that was actually originally purchased for what was going to be the Miller substation, which was not going to be on Miller. And it's the one that's on the golf course now, but that's where they were originally going to put it. And so the creek, trail follows the creek, obviously. Tannehill Creek, for if you don't know, starts at Highland Mall, and actually goes under 35 and comes up there near Cameron Road at the thrift store. If you're kind of aware, it's pretty awful right there, but then goes through the park. And then it goes on into the golf course, and I don't know if there will be a trail along it in the golf course or not, but they are trying to do that, but at least get around to the perimeter trail for up Millers. So.
Commissioners, other questions? We do have one person who'd like to provide some public testimony on this. Gerard Kenny? Yes.
Mic is already on. It's already on. Thank you. I'm Gerard Kenny. Many of you know me. I chaired the task group that Rick Urbaniak and others served on back in the 90s that established the vision for Miller. And a couple of points I'd like to make after hearing the current report on the development. One is that the fact that there's a very sophisticated process to determine that we didn't want the runoff from Miller to be treated off-site. We wanted runoff to be treated on-site. So that is the reason you have the perimeter greenway all the way around 2/3 of the site. But also we wanted to use the greenways, that greenway plus all the greenways in the project to connect the neighborhoods across Miller on all sides. So the whole idea of connectivity, instead of Miller being isolated or gated, that it actually facilitates transportation, bikeways, pedestrian ways, paths to the development itself in the neighborhoods. And I'm really glad to see that being implemented. Another thing is that the control tower, which is saved, I'm hoping someday that it will be actually functional again. Also, was emphasized in the original report, saving as many of the icons as possible. And that's true of the hangar, which we'll be hearing about later. So I just wanted to thank Catellus for following up on those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Well, the next item on our agenda, which is an action item, is discuss and possible action on a recommendation to City Council regarding the Browning Hangar. And before we start, I just wanted to make a couple of very brief comments because this has been a topic for the community and for this commission for the last several months. I did want to make one point. I think based on a lot of the discussions, and we've covered many aspects of it and what potentially issues that could be related to this project, but I think there were a couple of takeaways, and one thing is no matter what ideas people had, I think pretty much everybody agreed that there were two clear objectives. One was obviously preserving the hangar, and second, preserving public access to the hangar, preferably for the rest of eternity or as long as that structure exists. And so there have been lots of ideas kicked around. I want to commend Andrew for taking the initiative to try to start putting together a list of recommendations. There's been lots of feedback from this commission, and he's going to be presenting an updated version of those recommendations, and I'll ask him to kind of focus on the ones that, the language that's different from our last meeting. Like I said, I think there's pretty broad support for those two clear objectives. And there are lots of other things, but while there are other ideas that might be useful, if we detract and sort of go down rabbit trails on other issues, we take away attention from the key goals and what steps are going to get us to yes. And so with that, Andrew, would you kind of walk through basically the changes from our June meeting?
Yeah, as you'll remember, it's reflected in our minutes that we tabled this for possible action at this meeting from our previous meeting. In the interim, I met personally with Kenneth and Corky because they volunteered to help with revisions and what we brought back, and I had a Zoom conference with Rick and Michael to go over just exactly what you said as the introduction, and what you have before you and what's been sent out is the result. The background, whereas is essentially, if not identically, remain the same. The resolve bullet points have been softened probably to considerations rather than suggesting revisions to the master development agreement, because we understand we are an advisory body to city council, and if anything's going to occur, it's probably going to occur at city council anyway. But we are advisory, and I think we're correct in taking up, and we've had enough public testimony that we know it's an issue. And as Chairman Jones pretty clearly communicated, the real, probably strongest idea is that the public retains the right for access to the hangar and its property into the future. And that's probably, and it'd always be kind of probably part of the park, since it already sort of exists and feels that way. A new idea that was suggested, and that I'm actually heartened that appears in the transition working group recommendations, is that, and was one of, there were many concerns about the long-term funding of anything that we propose, of it staying publicly accessible, and the idea of setting up some sort of a long-term nonprofit or conservancy was added, and that's the last bullet point. Other than that, folks had a chance to read it as it was sent out with the agenda, and I will answer any questions.
Commissioners, questions or comments about the updated recommendations? And I'll note for the record, it was some time ago, but Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Ridow joined the meeting. That'll be reflected in the minutes. Guys, any, Richard or Chris, any other questions or comments on this?
No, not at this time. Thank you, though.
All righty. Anybody else?
I have one.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Kathy.
One of the other things that we had talked about at the last meeting was that you hadn't talked to Catellus. Were you able to get with them and see kind of what they were working on and if any of this could play into what they were doing?
I haven't. I thought these were such suggestions that I think this is communicating that to them. And so I think it's almost starting the ball rolling. I mean, it certainly has been known since June, because I think they probably paid attention to what was presented. But I'm willing to. I just did not have time to meet with them. But again, I think this is starting the ball of what we think are suggestions to them. And I actually commend them for what they've already done at the hangar.
Commissioners, other questions? All right then, hearing none, we'll see if anyone signed up for provide up to 3 minutes of public testimony on this topic. Thank you. First, to provide testimony, Jeffrey Brown.
My name is Jeff Brown, and we need to pass the recommendation for a conservancy for the Browning Hangar. Here's one good reason. Just look at France and the 2024 Paris Olympics. From the breathtaking opening ceremonies to the unforgettable closing moments and all the incredible sports events in between, the Paris Olympics were a resounding success. But what truly set these games apart was France's ability to showcase its rich cultural heritage, seamlessly blending history with modern athleticism. Much of the success of the 2024 Olympics was due to France's commitment to preserving its historic landmarks. The French were able to host beach volleyball at the base of the Eiffel Tower and equestrian events at the Palace of Versailles because they have invested time, effort, and resources into maintaining these iconic sites. This foresight allowed them to offer the world a unique and unforgettable Olympic experience. Of course, such preservation efforts come at a cost. But as the Paris Olympics has shown, the returns on these investments are immeasurable. The Games not only generated significant economic benefits, but also solidified France's global reputation as a nation that values and preserves its cultural treasures. When the magnificent Notre Dame Cathedral was devastated by fire, it wasn't just a national tragedy, it was a loss felt by the entire world. Yet the response was swift and unified. The French, along with people from around the globe, understood the importance of restoring this symbol of their cultural identity. They developed a plan, rallied resources, and are now working tirelessly to ensure Notre Dame remains a beacon of history and resilience. Here in Austin, we face a similar challenge. If we want to preserve and maintain our own rare remaining cultural icons, like the Browning Hangar, we must approach the task with the same level of care, planning, and investment. The City of Austin should establish a nonprofit conservancy dedicated to this cause, bringing together community members, experts, and fundraisers to ensure the Browning Hangar remains a vibrant part of our city's heritage. Just as France has shown the world the value of preserving its historic landmarks, we too can make the Browning Hangar a lasting symbol of Austin's cultural legacy.
Thank you, Jeff. Next is Kathy Reagan.
I'm Kathy Reagan. One of the reasons we travel to other countries is to soak up their culture and their history. And one of the main reasons, or first reasons that we go, of course, if we're being truthful, is for the food. But the culture and history is really what draws us there to begin with. So as Jeff was mentioning, you know, other countries put millions of dollars and lots of effort into maintaining and protecting what they have in their past. Here in the United States, we're not too good about doing that. Let's face it, we'd rather tear something down and build something new. So it's gratifying to me to see that this commission has come together to preserve one of the only 3 remaining boat truss hangars in the country. And we thank you for all of the time that you have put into it. We thank you for listening to our presentations over the last several months. And we're very appreciative of the time and effort that you've put in to put this proposal together to forward to the City Council. Thank you very much from all of us who use the hangar.
Thank you, Kathy. Next is Gary Reagan.
Yes, I'm Gary Reagan, and I'm just here basically to say thank you. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for sharing our concerns. Thank you for the outreach that you've done. And I just don't want you to think, you know, we're a bunch of freeloaders out there saying, you know, do this for us. We want to work with you, and we really appreciate all that you've done. So, our thanks.
Next is Ron Ragsdale.
And I also wanted to say thank you to the commission. I know this has been a lot of work, everything that you do, and then listening to our concerns, taking to heart, looking into the issues, and I know the issues are complicated. With the city, Catellus, there's lots of interests that are being served. I'm so proud of the entire development of Mueller, and thank you for this recommendation. I also am part of the pétanque group. It was a little more than a year ago that a friend in my neighborhood who plays pétanque told me about it and said, if you just show up, just walk to the hangar, someone will invite you to play within 60 seconds. And 45 seconds after I showed up, one of these people here walked up and said, hello, my name, well, I'll just say, hello, my name is Jeff. We're playing pétanque. Would you like to join us? And that kind of community, that kind of inclusion, that kind of welcome is throughout the entire group, not just the pétanquers, but all the people that are using the hangar. It's a place of welcome and inclusion, and I think it speaks well for our city. So again, I wanted to say thank you, and we appreciate the recommendation that's being made.
Thank you. Next is Gerard Kinney.
Hello again. I too want to thank the commission for its dedication to the preservation of the hangar and to the commitment for it to have continued public use in some manner. My firm did a study of the reuse of the hangar 15, 20 years ago, and there's a lot of potential there that has not really been realized yet, I think, in the planning. And I'm hoping, as these people have suggested, that the city of Austin, I realize that you guys are not going to be figuring out how to fund it, but an important thing for both the hangar and the Miller Tower that I mentioned earlier is that there does need to be identified a funding source to really have these two structures, the hangar and the tower, achieve their potential. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Paul.
My name is Paul Greppler. I'm with Wilshirewood Neighborhood Association, and previous speakers have done pretty much all the work I was going to do, so thank you all very much. I would simply like to say that we in Wilshirewood very much enjoy the spaces that Mueller has provided. It's a wonderful, wonderful place, wonderful job. With respect to Browning Hangar, I would request respectfully that perhaps something that could be added into the discussion, the recommendation, would be some better signage, so more people know that it is in fact a public space and can be used. I know that I went around the neighborhood, and also last time we had our neighborhood meeting, asked people if they knew anything about it. And I would say that, I'll use quantitative instead of qualitative measures. About 75% of our neighborhood does not. So I think something as simple as some physical signage or other communicative medium would really assist in that regard, no matter what happens. And again, I think, speaking for myself at least, I sincerely hope the outcome of this and the recommendations to the city, and if the city would listen, is that this would be a preservation project. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last person is Pat Giles.
Hello, I'm Pat Giles, and I too am a member of Legation Bulls Club, the Petanque Club. And I do also want to echo the sentiments that we are very grateful for the new recommendation and the plan to keep the Browning Hangar at least partially accessible and open and free to the public. The Browning Hangar is a very special place. It's idyllic and beautiful with the lake and the lights in the background and the fountain, and we have a roof over our heads to play petanque, and so it's protected. And that gives us a lot of freedom to play. I don't know what we do without it. It's a French game, obviously, petanque, but when I play on Sunday afternoons, it feels very, I think of a Norman Rockwell painting, and it feels very Americana to me. It's just, it's really cool. We have a great club. It's social, it's athletic. We invite everyone and anyone to play, as you've heard. You know, people walk up, and if they express any interest at all, someone is approaching them and inviting them to join. So it's a great sense of community. It's a lifeline for me. My life gets a little complicated, and it's just so nice to know that the hangar's there whenever we are playing. So again, I just want to thank you so much, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. That concludes all of the public testimony on this topic. Commissioners, any other comments or questions you wanted to make before we? Yes, go ahead, Josh.
I just wanted to, almost just kind of work through this, because I also had Kathy's same question of, is this something that would still allow it to be a business? Is this something that would trip it up in a way that it doesn't have a business that could help support it and have another community asset? What I'm reading of this is that it's considered, I think a lot of care and effort was taken into it. Everything I've read into it is kind of softened the language. I'm still willing to have a little bit more discussion on that, but it feels as if it's become more of a compromise. And I do wish we had feedback from Catellus, because I'm not an attorney, but it seems as if a business could still operate within this. But I don't know. Kathy, do you have anything else? It's we're kind of in this where it seems as if it's something that kind of solves both, but I was just curious if anyone else had any other thoughts or any parts of this, but I am really appreciative of the work that's done.
Yes, Kathy, you had a comment.
I mean, the only thing that I'll say personally, I don't like that we haven't talked to Catellus, that we had 2 months. I thought that was part of what was gonna happen. And I also still don't agree with just, this is really unclear about food, and if the city is expected to take care of food, I'm not in favor of that. So I still have a lot of questions about it, but I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about it other than I wish we had that piece.
The only other thing I'd add is I think some of those things are kind of recommendations, but the key steps I thought were the addition of the restrictive covenants as a tool that could be used, public or private, because the goal is keep the main thing, save the project, and the restrictive covenants is a way to ensure public access, no matter who owns it. And then the other suggestion about, and we'll hear more about that in the next topic about conservancy. That's if it applies to public parks, that's also a potential funding mechanism to help support all of the parks, including the landmarks, the tower, and the hangar and other properties. So this was sort of, I think it adds enough changes and it's broad enough that it leaves enough tools for the city and other stakeholders to kind of achieve the goal. So that's right. Any other comments or thoughts?
I mean, prior to the last recommendations, I did make myself available to Greg Weaver and Catellus. And there was actually a meeting set up, and you'll have to understand a little bit about the city's inter-office program called Teams, where they set up meetings. I learned Zoe, my quadri, my council sponsor, and set up appointment with Greg Weaver, but I only found out about 40 minutes before the start of it. And I jumped, well, actually I found out about the time it was started. I jumped on the Teams meeting, but it was about 20 minutes late and they were already gone. But I said, I'm here, I'll meet with you anytime. So it's always been an open invitation. And then a couple of times when I've been up there for meetings, I've asked if Greg was in. So I've attempted to. But again, I see this as a starting point of conversations with Catellus.
Okay. If there are no other comments from the commissioners, did anyone want to make a motion regarding this recommendation of City Council? Andrew?
Move acceptance, since I wrote it and brought it forward.
All right. Is there a second?
Approval, whatever we're doing.
Is there a second? Oh, Christopher? Oh, let me go. Who am I? Oh, I'm sorry, Ken, I'm sorry, you were right in front of me. Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Any further questions? Those in favor of the recommendation to City Council regarding the preservation of the Browning Hangar, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The motion,
I'm sorry, could you do a raise of hands so I can just?
okay. With those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, we got them? And those opposed? There are none opposing, so the motion carries. Thank you for everyone who worked on this, and there's still more work to be done, but we're making progress. All right, the last item on our agenda is a discussion item, and just as a reminder, commissioners, we won't be taking formal actions on it, and one of the reasons we don't take formal actions is, it's my understanding, and staff can correct me on this, but that when it comes to a work group, the work group recommendations are made to the commission, but the minute we formally accept the report itself, then the work group comes to an end. And since there's always a possibility there may be a little more wisdom that we could gather from this work group, we won't formally accept the report today, but can do so at our next meeting. And it's presented as a draft, although I think it's substantially done. There may, based on our discussions, be some minor suggestions or tweaking. And also, based on our discussion, there may be additional actions that the commission could take based on some of the ideas that the work group brought through. The other thing I wanted to mention, this work group, and since I heard people, since we just had the Olympics, using the passing of the baton, this work group didn't have to start from scratch. It built on the work of our previous transition work group, and I want to thank Ken for your leadership there, and everybody, including a lot of the people on this work group who worked with you on that. And I especially want to thank all of the work group members, Dave, Chris, Kathy, and of course, Corky, for taking time from your busy schedules to put this draft report together. What we want to do today is, Corky, if you could kind of lead us in I love the fact that you started with the guiding principles, because that's a reminder of what we're supposed to be doing. And what I'd like you to do today is just kind of walk through with us the various recommendations included in this draft report, And I'm hoping to get feedback from the rest of the commissioners and then hear public testimony. And then following this presentation and discussion, then we'll start thinking about what additional steps we need to take as a commission and what actions we might recommend to council. So Corky, would you?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for noting the work group, because it was really a team effort that did this. And as you usually get in the discussion of the various segments, that they were really authored by various members of the work group. So it's a pretty good deal. It was an interesting piece of work for many reasons, but particularly because it's right in the center of our work, right in the middle of our work, the MDA was extended by 2.5 years, which really didn't relieve any of the urgency, but it did some of the pressure. And it made it for a different kind of pace as we got a little further along. And also, it was, we had to have a conversation early on about the fact that we would be making recommendations, not only, but for the players who compose Miller, the people who make Miller, who was wondering where our authority or jurisdiction was to actually make, or the impertinence of making recommendations to direct it to the Miller Foundation, or to Catellus, or to the city, or to the POA. And that was something we kind of had to wander through a bit at the beginning, decided just to go for it, because someone had to make them. And taking the overview of the end of the MDA and what work was left to do, it really involved 4 principal players. We spoke with all of them in our work, and thankful for their input, not just the time we spoke with them, but their continuous input. And the other thing was that we realized, as we had our discussions, that Miller is really at a point now, sort of our adolescence, I guess. Maybe we're moving from adolescence into adulthood, I'm not sure. We have issues that are looming that we really have to pay attention to. I think the one that we talked the most about here was the erosion of the infrastructure. And as we've aged and we find out that we're not that pristine young thing anymore, it's not only the physical infrastructure, but also the governance infrastructure, which is changing, which is, of course, a good thing, as we've moved more and more responsibilities from the project from Catellus to the POA, as was directed in the MDA. So we're sort of still, we're really still in process of change. And so what we've tried to frame here are some recommendations that we have that certainly do need input and certainly do need suggestions. So I want to please don't refrain as we get into this. And it was helpful to have participated in and had the work of the work group that Ken led a couple of years ago, because we didn't have to go back and kind of say why, because we've already done that work. We really had to say what needs to happen. And so we decided to be bold about our recommendations and to be creative about them too, think a little bit out of the box about some things that would happen. So I'm going to invite Chris and Kathy particularly to join in along with this presentation, and I'll actually give them lead in some of this. It was really important to start with the guiding principles, as that's been the direction and the frame for all the work the commission's done as long as I've been around. I mean, it's the tenets which we operate upon. And the fear spoken, and it's starting to be realized, is that as we've moved away or grown, matured as a community, these principles aren't so obvious to the members of our community. And we're starting to have some pushback in subtle ways to the spirit of those guidelines. Not in any kind of a malicious way, but certainly in an uninformed way. So it begs that issue about the elders with their history, their understanding of history, and working with people who are new to our lives, new to our community, and how do we live these principles when we have some people who don't even know that they're in existence. I hope that's not too muddled. All I'm trying to say is that this is a surprise to many people that we have guiding principles that set the vision for Miller. So we need to do some more talking about that. So one of the recommendations is going to be about the legacy of Miller, and I think we need to pay attention to some of that stuff. So as we went through the guiding principles and started talking about what we just knew from experience with the commission and also lived experience here at Miller, there were really 6 areas which are outlined here that we wanted to pay attention to. They weren't identified as the same as the guiding principles, they were different. The fiscal responsibility, sustainability, and security, infrastructure, and the issues about the stability of that, public access, which we just had an example of, this broader issues in Hangar, affordable housing and how to maintain and sustain that important, very important aspect of Miller, promise of Miller to the community, and also how do we transmit the legacy in a meaningful way to all the people of not just Miller, but also the broader community as well. And then some of the things we've already talked about earlier were some of the unsolved and unresolved issues that need to happen. And thankfully for the extra 2.5 years, because it gives time to pace that out and get those projects completed really well. So what was obvious as we went through this, is I have several points, so we'll get into this. The importance of Miller as original, not even a city, but really a regional, cultural, and economic player. It's way bigger than Miller, it's way bigger than East Austin, and it's way bigger than Austin. And we see that because, and thanks to Chris for helping us with that, and also Dave, that was a real important understanding to come to, and the people that we talked with too understood that. The second is we definitely need some additional sources of revenue to support Miller. The POA, I mean, what we have now, the city budget, whatever it's giving to support Miller, is not a broad enough base to support the needs that we have. So you'll hear more conversation about conservancy, et cetera. But we're looking for ways to allow the larger community to support Miller because they're using it. And the larger community, and to develop a mechanism that can receive funds and distribute funds and solicit funds. So we need some kind of a not-for-profit entity that can help bring additional revenue sources to Miller. The other, I think I've already mentioned, was kind of the maturing issues that we have. We've had issues all along with public access and property development and all that, but I think as we've gotten from growing up and grown out, those issues have changed. And I think we've talked about those enough here that you know what they are. And again, the governance is changing, which is the thing we've looked forward to for a long time. And I don't mean about the commission, because our life has always been known about the beginning and the commission, but how to transfer to a more representative form of governance here, completed. So we've been in transition for that, and that really is maturing. And I'm thankful to Catellus too for assuring that transition will conclude in December of this year. It's not going to be carried on through, so we'll have that transition completed soon. So enough of that. Now, so I don't want to do all this talking here, so let me just introduce some of these and ask Chris and Kathy to comment. On the fiscal responsibility, there were several important things. One is the TIF. That's the first recommendation we made. And we know because of some of the discourse around Seaholm and the way the TIF there was concluded and closed, that there might, well, first of all, we really felt it was important that the TIF shouldn't be closed until all the burdens have been met as required. Because there is conversation about the TIF, does it live through its natural closing, which I think it buys out in 2032. So that was really important. And also that explore the possibility of some of the reserves be designated by council for the use here at Miller for whatever appropriate use that would be. Of course, the parks and infrastructure come to mind initially, but there may be others. Let me get through these three, and we'll get Chris and Kathy in here. So considering what we're really looking at in terms of operations and maintenance in the future, there was a lot of discussion about that wasn't really, we weren't able to certainly discern what that burden is. And so the thought would be that there'd be a comprehensive audit on operations and maintenance responsibilities. So we know what our targets are in terms of financial support to ensure those. Did I say that right, Chris? All right, we'll get back in a minute. And then the third is that, again, that was a point I just made about the POA, or really almost, it could be external to the POA probably. I think you could set that as a not-for-profit. Chris knows a lot about this because he helped with the establishment of the Trail Conservancy. But we do know from watching our parks in Austin, Peace Park, Waterloo Park, and the Bark Springs Conservancy, the three of those, and to some extent the Shoal Creek Conservancy, we do know what the establishment of those kind of third-party funding mechanisms do, that they bring an asset base, a resource base to parks and institutions. Is very helpful in terms of long-term sustainability. So those were the big recommendations. Now I'm going to get Chris. I'd like you to comment on these because many of these were yours.
No, thank you, Corky, and just a shout out and at the very least give Corky a high five and a thank you for her fearless leadership on this working group. I think you covered those really well, and I'd just say like two high level things that really stuck out to us in our data gathering and our discovery with various stakeholders were one that that the system in which Miller was built on 20 years ago was one, and especially when it comes to operations and maintenance, and just also the inclusive nature of it, was rather experimental. And then secondarily related to that, the impact and the reverberation in terms of the influence of the park system, in particular Miller Lake Park, is really reaching in region. And thus it is loved to a level of service that is one that is not sustainable. So that's really the two pieces I wanted to add.
Kathy, do you have anything to add in that section? No? Okay. So should we go through these, or do you want?
Yes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
before we move on to the next section, just wanted to clarify something. When you talk about a recommendation for a nonprofit conservancy, that would support public parks, the POA parks, the landmarks, the tower, the hangar, and other structures. So it would be, is that the concept, or am I getting that wrong?
I don't recall the hangar and the control tower being included, but
It could be.
it was more for the parks.
Okay.
Because we don't own the tower. The city's always going to own the tower, and the hangar is supposed to be sold. So I don't know why we would have a conservancy for something like that, but it was intended absolutely for Lake Park and all the parks.
Thank you.
Chris,
Yes, Chris.
Because your familiarity with how conservancies are set, I mean, the idea really was for the parks.
Okay.
But could you talk about that just a little bit, about what the opportunities are with the conservancy?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think at a high level, the question that was just asked regarding the scope that would be under the realm of a 501c3 nonprofit conservancy is to be determined. We did, as Corky and Kathy mentioned, really focus mostly on the landscape and the parks and the open space. The value there is that that land can, well, depending on the piece, it allows you the ability to apply for grant funding, apply for things that are above and beyond the base minimum from what the city can afford. And similarly, back to the experimental notion of pieces of land that will continue as part of the POA, I think the expectation, and one of the things we heard is the expectation was the bigger influence and the bigger impact that the park space has on the larger community. And thus, like, is the POA set up for a sustainable means financially to be able to cover things like erosion, riparian habitat, things that matter from just the full system that makes the park a great place and a great destination.
And Richard, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I also, I see on the Environmental Commission, and we have an opportunity to interact with some of the nonprofits. And time does not allow me to fully express my disdain for the nonprofit model. I understand the theoretical benefits of it, but essentially what it is doing with the parks is it's sucking money out of the park system and putting it into the nonprofits who pocket the money and return very little of value to the park system. And if you go to the Form 990s, which are the tax forms that are online for all these nonprofits, what you will see is their bank accounts have more money than you can possibly imagine in them. And the amount of money they funnel back into projects in the parks is just a fraction. And they still go on to ask for donations from individuals like you and me, and then mega donors like C3 and everyone else. I understand the benefits and the limitations of the Parks Department. I've worked with the Parks Department before on many things. It's a challenging thing in the city when the city doesn't want to cough up the money to support the parks. And so I do understand the conundrum. But when you bring in a nonprofit, you're giving up a substantial amount of control for a benefit that never meets the goals that have been laid forth. You're going to be, in the long run, really disappointed with the outcome. But that's kind of the way it is, having gone through I've gone through all the financials of the Trail Foundation, from top to bottom. It's not something you want to really be a part of. But, that's my opinion.
Thank you, Richard. Kathy, you had a comment.
So this report is kind of just suggestions. The point being that right now these parks are privately funded by the homeowners and the property owners of the neighborhood. And is that sustainable for the level of use that it's getting? No. So it's just a suggestion. It's really a report that's tying up loose ends and things that we see as issues going toward transition. So we're not saying that we're forming a nonprofit right now. It's just a suggestion. And the point being that the funding is not currently there to maintain the park really to much of a standard at all.
I understand the conundrum, I really do.
And it's not funded by the city of Austin. It's funded by the people who own the properties here. I just really want to drive that home.
It's a challenge to figure out how to work it out. All I can offer is the opinion that you've got to be very cautious when you bring in a nonprofit, that you give up a lot of control to the nonprofit, and good, it may work out. My experience has been with the nonprofits I've dealt with through the environmental commission is the benefit is minimal. I understand this is a recommendation. My 2 cents worth is, there's red flags all over the place.
Corky, you had a comment.
Yeah. And thank you, Richard, for bringing those points forward. I think we have a varying degree of experience. But again, this is, the point is we have to find some other revenue sources to support this activity. And we'll figure that out as we go along. Chris, do you have anything you want? I'm sorry, Michael, I think you need to, are you directing traffic here?
No, you can go ahead, if
Chris, do you want to make a comment, no, Andrew? No, Chris? Yeah.
I can keep going.
Well, let's see what Andrew has to say, and then we'll get going on the second part on the infrastructure, because that's really what we're talking about here.
I had the idea of an additional model that might be considered is the triple P, a public-private partnership,
Could be.
a long-term contract like at Zilker Park.
Thank you for that. Is there any other, let's move on to the next section. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Since you authored this, Chris, why don't you talk about the infrastructure stability recommendations?
Yeah, so I think we covered this at a high level, but one thing we just wanted to recommend, and this is based on best practices from my colleagues in the world of landscape architecture and then operations and maintenance, which is really to set up a 3 to 5 year revised O&M strategy. And this is something, a landscape is constantly evolving. It has a variety of variables, including people and weather and other. But really just like reorient and set up what is the future level of service goal and how do we get there. And that's something that, when the time comes, I'm happy to help the POA, really articulate more what that means, and also to just send them in the direction of a couple different groups that can handle it. To get into the weeds just slightly on that topic, one of the things that we see across the community is the problem with the level of service is we have a lot of mow and low landscape contractors that are being asked to be gardeners as well. And that's not really something that they're really built for, just at a high level. And the level of service that we need in order to meet the demands is one that is protecting the riparian fringe of the lake, getting in there and restoring the perennials and the native habitat and such that is more set in the gardening category. So that's something that is newer. It is something that I think the conservancies are very focused on, in particular. But there's a few other spaces. I think Republic Square is a group that has really worked to figure this out in recent history, given the variables and the challenges that they have. And then the other piece of this, which is there's really just two, is the recommendation that the POA should provide a full-time staff manager that really oversees this park system, including landscaping, facilities management, aquatic maintenance, and tree and greenery sustainability. So again, without knowing what the budget is, that would be a situation that would be pretty ideal, because then this individual or individuals can understand the values of the POA and then work with these groups that are not directly tied to the POA but could be consultants to be able to support the implementation of those kind of different lanes of focus.
All right. Any other questions regarding that set of recommendations? Yes, Andrew.
I will say, I believe there's a landscape manager right now, Richard, under Joe Restuccia. He's mainly looking at the common areas, but I would think he might also, to some degree, be over this, over the ring parks.
Okay. Well, that's something that I guess sounds like something that would be worked out at a later
And
time.
we talked with various the people who we interviewed for ideas and stuff, it was clear that there is staff that was recommends a little bit, a broader approach to it, and that's what this is about. This is not in any way saying these are negligent in any way. It's more of a conceptual comment about the breadth of that requirement. Yeah. The next section is on public access. And of course, we have all talked about that this evening. Do you want to talk about this one, Kathy? Or I can?
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah, why don't you take that one?
It's, why we really talked about some of this is because this was public land and this community was built for an asset to the east side in the city of Austin. And if you go back to our tenants and how we were formed and the input from the surrounding neighborhoods that created what would eventually be here, it's just really important that our parks and our pools remain accessible to the public as they are, and how do we do that? So just a little bit of text there that talks about it, that it remain open. There's not really suggestions, but just that they
Why don't
remain
you
open.
just read the actual recommendation, because I'm not sure if it has a copy of it.
The city should amend covenants or take other legal measures to ensure public access to Miller Parks, pools, trails, and landmark sites, including but not limited to the hangar and control tower park in perpetuity.
Comments from anybody about maintaining public access to all of these sections of Miller?
The only comment I'd like to make further on this one is this is a particular situation where we are having more discussion in the community about public access, particularly the pools. And again, it's coming from a different point of view. It's not necessarily exclusionary kind of thing. It's financial issues. So it's important that we get clear, I think a clear comment about public access as fully as we can. That may not be full enough, but we were all pretty committed, very committed to that particular recommendation.
Well, and it's another example too, how something is paid for by the people who own the properties here with the small contribution of a payment, like at a city pool, but otherwise it's funded by property owners. So how does that make sense going into the future?
Exactly. Okay. Kathy, you want to do this from the
Sure.
affordable housing? Yeah.
I do want to make a point that in the MDA, it does specifically say affordable housing for 1 year. And I think that everyone feels like it's important to maintain this as long as possible and as much as we possibly can, which is why we took it upon ourselves to kind of expand some of this. So our recommendations, so there is a Miller Foundation that oversees the program. It should provide staff to assist homeowners. They've been pretty good at being a resource when people need help or financial assistance, but they don't really have someone if my AC goes out, who do I call? Things like that. A lot of the homeowners in the affordable housing program are first-time homeowners and don't have historical home ownership in their family, and they don't know how to maintain a home. So it's just a suggestion. And that helps kind of some of the other points here, that when they go to sell their home, it's still in working order and it's being maintained. Again, some people, if you've never been exposed to home ownership, you don't know how to maintain a home. And it's not just something that you wake up one day and know how to maintain your home. It's something that you learn. And the affordable program should incentivize owners to maintain their homes. And they've done some changes to the program to help with this. Say a homeowner switches out their HVAC and then they have to sell, they take that into consideration with their closing costs and if they can reimburse them for that big capital cost. How else can we incentivize owners to maintain their homes? Another one, Catellus and the foundation should really require that affordable homes are built to the same standards as market rate homes. We've seen a lot of mechanicals that have failed at an earlier rate than some market rate homes in the affordables. I don't know if people just got bad batches or what happened, but that puts an extra burden on affordable homeowners that maybe they can't afford. And the city of Austin, I think this was in the works, but we put it in anyway to tie up the loose end, assigning the affordable apartment audit to the city's housing department. Any questions? Yeah?
Kathy, thanks for going over that. One of the things that I think we heard in the past, and please correct me if I am off base here, or especially around the apartments, where you have additional fees that are being assessed to those individuals who are in the affordable housing or apartment programs. And so there's additional rates that are going up, let's say going back to your pool example, just keeping the general lights on in this whole building. There may be additional charges that they're charging, or parking or whatever. So I thought that was an issue that was being identified as a concern that could impact the affordable housing program from an apartment standpoint. And I don't know if I'm making this up right now, but
I don't recall ever hearing that. The issue that we're having countrywide, nationwide, is that our affordable housing and apartments is tied to MFI. So as the city's MFI goes up.
Maybe that was it then.
Yeah, we
and
just.
I apologize for
we just don't
crossing that over.
That's okay. We just don't have a lot of control over that.
Yeah.
That would be a very big legislation or some way to subsidize it.
Yeah.
Which, hey, there's so much money in the city. Let's just see if there's a little extra. Probably not.
Okay, sorry for confusing
No.
that matter.
That's okay. I mean, we're all remembering our own things, and I think it's important to have a conversation.
Yes, Rick.
That's a really interesting thing, and of course, I think it's federal government, housing and urban development. I'm not sure who defines that 1/3 of your income is what you could spend on housing. And so maybe that number is what needs to be adjusted. The MFI is high in Austin, I think we know that. So it might be a regional thing, but that is an interesting thing. Like, how do I go back to the audit of affordable apartments? I actually tried calling you when I read this the first time and didn't get hold of you. So apparently Catellus is currently doing the audit of the apartments within Miller to see that each complex maintains the number of affordable units that they have now. Okay, so, but citywide, is there a city department that does that? Or is it countywide, or, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So there's really 3 different types of units here. I can think of right there. There's ownership, which that's a little easier because it's going to be a deed restricted or restricted covenant, right? That is that it could be in the loan. It's going to be sold to another homeowner through Mueller Foundation. And then the others are going to be, you're going to have your affordable housing like Foundation Communities or like Wallflower Terrace or like Aldridge 51, which are run by a group. It's going to be 100% affordable. It's all kind of a part of the program. And then there's like another subsection of the OMLI stuff here that might be 15% affordable to try to get us there. And the city does have a compliance and monitoring team. It's in the housing department. We work with them on a regular basis. It pulls numbers every year. It pulls a subset every year and does an audit on those. And it is looking primarily at income. Because it is, just as Kathy said, the median family income for a family of 4 in the MSA region is around, I think, $120,000, which is actually, so it's a lot. And our funding goes to 30% MFI, median family income, and 50% median family income. So there is monitoring and compliance programs. It's really nice to know. I didn't know that Catellus is also doing it. We have tens of thousands of units across the city, so additional monitoring always helps. But I think definitely, I feel comfortable with with the ones here that are 100% affordable, because that's kind of run by groups. All these groups that do these have been doing them for a long time, but it's really good to know that there's already an existing that Catellus is doing, and it's also beneficial to know that it's all omni, or it's like mostly omni, right? Like of the properties here, there's like it is helpful when you have more of one group that has kind of been doing it. So it could be more that the challenge often lies where you have a big tower downtown or something like that. It's brand new, and they're just not used to renting and doing income checks. Whereas I think here that there's probably, hopefully, some shared knowledge between property managers. So, yeah, that is something, there's research by our department, and, we're working on improving that too, having kind of a property manager page and improve that. But it's definitely harder on the development incentive stuff in this PUD or like a density bonus downtown, because you're asking them to completely change their business model and look at income, which they're not as comfortable with. Does that help?
Yeah, more so than I realized that was involved. I mean, I was looking at it as, are these, is a complex, supposed to have 15% affordable units, and are they doing that every year? I don't know, my understanding is that it doesn't have to be, the unit can change. It's just the number of the total, it needs to be 50, it doesn't have to be a fixed unit. And I was wondering if there are complexes that are getting away not having the full complement. Not even thinking about, are they charging the right rent kind of thing too. So I'm glad all that's going on. So that's helpful to know. But it is interesting how that, I'm assuming the city then will take over that when Catellus is gone. And there's not, it's working okay?
Yeah, this is, I didn't know that. I'm not a part of the monitoring team, but I'll definitely bring this back to the department, because that would be really interesting, that if Catellus finds something, they let us know about it. The housing department can add years on. That's pretty much our only tool. We can add years onto the affordability period.
Right.
That's what happens. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see the report or see how that's reported out, because more information for us is for the housing department and that team is better.
All right, thank you.
Yes, go ahead,
Just
Corky.
a comment. This is why that particular item in this report was so interesting, because we started to think about, we knew Catellus was doing that work, because they would report on it all the time. But what happens when there's no Catellus? Who does that? And how do we find to make a recommendation that the city moves that or do that, it's like, well, we'll make that recommendation because it's obvious. We want that from our tenants, our guiding principles who would continue that. But how do we find the assurance that that's really being continued, particularly with the experience we have at downtown and those high-rise incentivized units that were sort of miraculously disappearing.
Commissioners, other comments or questions regarding the affordable housing recommendations? All right. And then next you have Miller Legacy and Community recommendations.
This is Dave's section, but
Okay.
we were in it. Basically, and we've heard, I was thinking earlier during the public testimony, great minds, because several people, Gerard and some of the people who were speaking about the hangar, talked about some of the things that we talked about in this very section. Because it is back to how do we tell the story of Miller, the full unvarnished truth about what motivated the surrounding communities to gather together and march downtown and demand a role. I think I like the demand word. I think that's what happened. And so I remember some of the rumors that were flying through town about the time about what was going to happen to Miller. The Trammell Crow Industrial Park was the one I remember the most. That thankful for the energy of the surrounding areas, or we would never have had this as a community asset. So telling that story is important, which is what the first recommendation is, and also doing it somewhere within Miller. We talk about physical space. What we mean is some kind of a a central point of information that can be distributed. The second one was the point about what we've asked for, I know is in progress, is that the signage in the community on the parks and the streets. And I know that's in progress, but it's underscoring that. And recognizing, and we've talked about this a great deal, the contributions of their namesakes to the history, but not just the history, the cultural and the folklore, really, of Austin. The street I live on is named after the ghost at the Driscoll Hotel, who is a real person and had importance in the community, but you wouldn't actually know that if you didn't know the charming story behind that. So I tell a lot. The third one is really, and it's not that this isn't in plans, but it's just sort of an underscoring, that the POA should ensure that adequate funds are available to continue community engagement programming. And that was community in the broad sense, because we know that we're talking about music at the park and the seasonal celebrations and parades and other gatherings. I would wonder what percentage of participants are residents outside of Miller. I remember the first experience I had personally here back in '07, when we were barely 200 houses out here, was coming out here on weekends just to see my slab, and the parks were packed, absolutely packed, with families and kids and playing out. The first time I went, my God, what is going on out here? And I realized it was an every weekend occurrence, that the community, I mean the surrounding communities and the broader community were here, and there couldn't have been any better advertisement for quality of life that was to come at Miller than the enjoyment everybody was having from a lovely park here where there'd been an airport. And the whole sense of community and quality of life and all of that, and openness that came with that, the desire is to continue that, and to be sure that the funding at the POA, and again, it's a funding issue, revenue issue, is adequate to encourage, invite, not allow, invite, include the broader community and what goes on there. So that's what those are recommendations. And that's Dave. That was Dave had his foot on the pedal and all those. Kathy, you want to do the last one? You want to do the unsold?
Yeah.
Sure. Any questions about the other part? We kind of already covered this with Brian earlier, unsold properties, and really, we just kind of wanted to list them out. If we missed any, we can add them, or if any get taken down before this is finalized, we can remove them. But we just wanted to make sure nothing was really missed.
Miller Central's the new item.
I would say that one's the important one, Miller Central. We do have a recommendation in here to just kind of give that to the POA. Just a suggestion. We can talk about that.
Well, I'm going to add to it though,
Go for
because
it.
it really came as not an afterthought. It was really the conclusion of a long and broad conversation about these parcels, which are dealt with separately, really are the front door to Miller. And they are the Hangar, Lake Park, and Miller Central. And the MDA says that the intention there is to sell Miller Central. But the thought was we're missing an opportunity here by not looking at Miller Central as the governing point for the community.
And the home of the story of
In the home of the story of Miller and whatever. And we understand Catellus is in there. We want Catellus to stay in there and be there and pay some rent. That would be wonderful. That the goal, which would probably take, I don't know if it take a change in the MDA. It's a big ask, a big recommendation, but it's a big deal. And so it was kind of the last thought we had is, while we're making recommendations, let's make a big, bold one. And that's sort of our big, bold, audacious recommendation. It gives a home to the to the concept of Miller and the history. That's it. I'm going to thank some people who helped us a lot. We had delightfully challenging, mind-driving conversations with, of course, the Catellus, Greg, and Brian. Great talks about what if, a lot of what if stuff. That was really lovely. The same with the Tan Adams Studio, the designers, who had wonderful ideas. And Gerard, we used your name a whole lot in those conversations. So the history and how it got here, how it was built, and more what ifs. What's next? What's on the horizon? The Miller Foundation, Francie Ferguson, and Jim Walker couldn't have been more forthright about the challenges they're facing and some of the support that they need, and their dedication to the horrible program, Rental Homes in Perpetuity. And Karen, with the Transition Committee of the POA, just wonderful contributors and challenging conversations.
Hey, Courtney, I just want to make sure you don't have a typo.
I do, we do have
You
typos all
have Jim
through, yeah.
Adams there
Yeah.
versus Jim
Yeah,
Walker.
he slipped down. No, Jim Walker, I think I said Jim Walker, I hope, but yeah, there are more than that here. And,
And remember, it's a draft. That's why it's called a draft.
And again, thanks to Rick and Michael for your support with this, but also Kathy and Chris and Dave were just a great team. And came with knowledge and information and big ideas. So I think we've probably left some stuff out. I'd be interested, I mean, I know we'll get ideas from you later and further, but I think that, you know, we were challenged to identify unaddressed, unresolved gaps and issues. There may be more. If there are, let us know. So this is the recommendations, and we're transferring them, you know, what do you want to do with this?
Before we finish this up, are there any other comments anyone had on the commission regarding the recommendations? Yes, Rick.
I want to make a quick, the Miller Central idea, I think is kind of important. I don't know how that's going to be resolved. What I've always thought is that Miller doesn't, you know, a community center would be great, you know. That could be a city-owned, there are others in around the city. What Miller doesn't have that so many of the neighborhoods around it and throughout the city are churches that have space that offer those spaces to the community for neighborhood meetings or kazoo classes or whatever there is, and Miller does not have that. And so I think the idea of Miller Central being that, if nothing else is probably going to pop up and be available, should be looked into. So I really like that idea. And again, there's a lot to resolve with that, but I like the idea.
Commissioners, any other comments? Yes, Kathy.
I just want to make one final comment. I thought of a couple of other things that just weren't stuck in this final draft. So if anybody does have anything to add, just please send it to us and we'll incorporate it. And there are typos, there's a few
Yeah,
typos.
just don't worry about it. We were thinking.
Happens.
Did anyone sign up to provide any public testimony? Okay, so what happens next?
Yeah.
I'd like each commissioner over the next, and give ourselves a deadline, over the next week, so by the end of next week, if you have suggestions about which recommendations we should move forward with, and who preferably with the focus on which recommendations would be most, since we're an advisory commission, which recommendations we might want to move forward with to send to city council. And in the meantime, like I said, there's time to make minor tweaks to the report and also incorporate some of the feedback from this meeting, including cautionary areas and what guardrails might be needed to make a certain recommendation effective. And so if you can do that, I don't have a calendar in front of me, but if somebody can figure out what next Saturday is. Next Saturday is August 23rd. So if you can send your recommendations, of course, as always, send them through your city email so that we'll have a good track of that. And then we'll make decisions regarding what next steps and if any of those would be included in the agenda for our September meeting. Again, I've said it before, but thank you. This is a great deal of work, and like I said, getting the ideas floating is half the job. And so I think you guys have done a great job of that. Future agenda items next month, I think we'll have an update on the parking, transportation management district, and there's some new activities there, including opportunities for, public input. And, we may have a recommendation on this topic. Have we heard from, are you thinking, 51st Street?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I know I've asked about it, I've been pestering about it forever, but it's maybe finally worked, or maybe there's just a great update that I'm excited for. So I heard they were gonna give an update at the next meeting in September. That's what the email was. I'm not sure who was on that. I know, I think Jill was on that.
Jill's not here today, and we'll follow up with Jill and, yes,
Yes, they have postponed.
okay. All right.
Not giving up.
Okay, but don't worry, we're gonna have an October meeting, and maybe, and some meetings for the next 2 years, or somebody will. So if you have suggestions, just send them to, for agenda topics for September or October, send them through your city email. As a reminder, it's important to keep track of that. With that done, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Is there a second? There is a second. Are there any objections? I hear none. Thank you all again. We did some good work today. Meeting adjourned. I'll see you in September.